All right. Before we begin, we just jumped ahead. Give me 1 second. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. Only panelists are displayed and heard, but we do want to hear from you. Feel free to ask questions throughout the session, but please use the Q&A button on your Zoom panel, not the chat. If it's put in the chat, we won't see it. So use the Q&A button. And yes, we will share both a link to the recording and the presentation slides as soon as possible after the webinar today. All right, my name is Raquel Cloyd, and I am the Business Development and Partner Manager here at Intellect. I'm going to introduce Steve in just a second, but I wanted to announce, if you have been following our webinar road trip series, we've had a series of webinars this summer, and we've had a contest. So if you've registered for any of our webinars, including today's webinar, you are entered to win a $100 Amazon gift card. We are going to announce the winner today, right before the Q&A session. So one of you may be winning a $100 gift card today. All right, and I'd like to introduce our speaker, Steve Gompertz. This is Steve's second time partnering with us. If you missed his first presentation, Guerrilla Tactics for Quality Leaders, the replay is available on our website at intellect.com. It was one of our best received webinars, and we're going to talk a little bit more at the end about an opportunity to take advantage of his 4-hour session on the same topic. Steve has over 30 years of experience in quality and medical technology, including roles at Pelican Biothermal, Abbott, Boston Scientific, Medtronic, and more. He is an adjunct instructor at St. Cloud University in Minnesota, is a Society for Quality Assurance Distinguished Speaker, and an MFES Distinguished Engineer. All right, we'll hear from Steve in just a few minutes. Before we begin, I wanted to tell you a little bit about Intellect. We are an award-winning quality management and environmental health and safety software company built on a no-code platform and powered with a robust AI integration. We help companies to automate quality processes, prepare for audits, and achieve their quality and compliance goals. Those goals include achieving and maintaining compliance with ISO, FDA, GXP, OSHA regulations, and more. Whether you're in med device, biotech, aerospace, automotive, electronics, labs, many other industries rely on Intellect to reduce operational risk, improve profitability, increase customer satisfaction, and increase revenue. We have over 30 quality and environmental health and safety applications that are ready to use out of the box, or you can use our no-code platform to build out custom applications to meet any quality or operational need. If you'd like to see a demo of our software, you can visit us at intellect.com or simply type in demo into the Q&A button on your Zoom panel, and we will reach out as soon as possible after today's session. All right, Steve, I am going to hand it over to you to let us know what quality system auditors are really looking for.
Great, thank you very much, Raquel. Hi, everybody. Great turnout today. Glad to see, especially the range in geography. Pretty impressive, particularly for those people who it's like in the middle of the morning or night, I should say. Thank you for signing on here. So yeah, as a slide would say, our topic today is to talk about what really happens in auditors' minds when you're going through a quality system audit. So maybe you could help prepare a little bit better and perform better in your audits. All right, I gotta make sure I hit the right button here. There we go. All right, so let's talk about some misconceptions first. I think too often we think of audits as being a witch hunt. That's how it feels, and I get it. There are certainly some auditors who make it feel that way, and it's not what they should be doing. Well-trained auditors understand that their purpose is to confirm that you are conforming and complying with whatever regs and standards are applicable, within the scope of the audit. But there are those auditors who just seem to make it more of a burden than it needs to be. But the truth is, the training that auditors go through, the standard on auditing, doesn't talk about that. It's not a hunt, and it's not started with the idea that something has to be found. It starts with the idea that everything is confirmed, everything is compliant. Confirm that. Right? All right. Again, there are those auditors out there who always seem like they feel like they have to find something in order to justify their value. Typically, those are more inexperienced auditors. I think early on, an auditor feels like, hey, if I miss something, that'll be bad. But more mature, experienced auditors, better trained auditors understand. Actually, we're hoping that things go perfectly. It's so much easier to perform an audit. The system's just in great shape, and there's really nothing to be found. It may be some minors, or maybe just some opportunities for improvement. But that's really what we're hoping for. We're not going in there, kind of evil intent, going, all right, boy, I can't wait till I can dig up something really good on these guys. For me, the best audits are the ones where I'm just really pleased with what I see. And I write plenty of audit reports myself that there's no findings. And it's just confirming, yep, everything looks pretty good. Next one. Oops, how come it's not moving? There we go. All right. Oops, went too far there. The idea that audits are passive events. Too often, I think auditees just go, yep, I guess it's something that gets done to me, and I just got to sit here and take it. And we'll talk about this today. No, actually, you are an active part of the audit or the inspection, and you need to do that. You need to take an active role in that. You got to remember, auditors, inspectors, a lot of times they are not familiar with your company. It may be the very first time they've ever heard of you, the first time they've ever stepped foot in your facility. And that's tough for them to understand things. So if you're going to be passive and not really participate, then they're going to make whatever assumptions they can glean from the information they're providing. And that's when things are not going to go well, because they're likely to misunderstand what they're seeing, what they're looking at. So you need to be active in helping them understand the context of what's going on and how they're seeing things. And that's going to give you much better results. And then the last is this idea of treating audits as, oh, of course, yeah, I guess we're required to, so it's a necessary evil. Bad attitude. Organizations that have really, effective, well thought out quality systems usually don't mind audits at all. Matter of fact, a lot of them look forward to it. One, it's a chance to demonstrate that they understand what they're doing, right, and get recognition for that. Others, it's just they understand it's always about continuous improvement, and so it's great to get another set of eyes on your quality system and your processes and understand where there's some additional opportunities for us to do things better, or to all right, yeah, that's not quite as good. It's okay, but it's not quite as good as it could be, right? So let's look for that, and let's not wait until something bites us, right, to find out. So you should be seeing audits as a really good feedback mechanism. All right, so let's talk about the objectives from an auditor's perspective. What are they looking for? What are they focusing on? First, I will go back and forth often when using the term audit or inspection, or I'll say audit/inspection. What's the difference here? Okay. Whoops, I keep hitting the wrong button here. There we go. Regulatory bodies like the FDA call them inspections. Your certification notification bodies call them audits. All right, so what's up with that? Inspections, like what you probably think of with that word when you do incoming inspection, in-process inspection, it's a look at the outputs, right? And that's kind of the FDA approach more often than not, is they look, the reg says you need to produce this, show me that. Right? You need to have these records, show me those records. And so often it's just they want to do an examination of those outputs. A lot of times they want to see them all. They're looking at your calibration process and they go, great, I want to see the last 3 years of calibration records. Or they're looking at, incoming inspection. And so they're going to want to look kind of like the same way you'll do sampling in your incoming inspections. They're going to sample the outputs, but at a very high percentage, right? So they look at a lot of records, a lot of outputs. And that's their way of confirming that, or that the process is performing as intended. And it tends to be very quantitative. They want to see numbers. They want to see good analysis and trends and things like that. Alternatively, when we talk about audits from, like I said, from the other kind of bodies, they're more focused on the process. Yes, they're interested in the outputs, but they want to understand, how did you produce those? Why did you produce them in that way? So they tend to do more of a lighter sampling of things. They'll look at training management and they'll say, all right, let's look at a few employees' training records. They might start with 3, see if they get a good enough trend, 4 or 5. And then they usually go, if they get the trend they're looking for, then they'll go, yeah, we're good. Now, if they find a negative trend, then they might go deeper and go, I want to see a bunch more of those records. But they're going to start out light and they're going to figure out how far do I need to dig. And it's really somewhat more qualitative in an approach, right? They want to understand the nuances of the process. Again, the how do you exactly do it? Why did you choose to do it that way? And then we'll go look at inspecting some of the outputs from there. But when we talk about those terms, inspections usually for regulatory authorities, audit for everybody else. All right. So an auditor's perspective and their priorities when they walk in. First and foremost, they want to see if you understand the requirements. So they're going to look at your procedures and they're going to say, have you correctly interpreted the requirements? Because if you didn't understand the requirement and the intent, right? Because there's what's in black and white, right? The reg says this, and we can all read that just fine and understand it. It's, do you know what's going on behind that, the why behind that? So they're going to look at that in your procedures. Have you correctly captured all the right requirements? Have you interpreted them correctly? And, have you documented that, clearly so that somebody can follow it? Assuming you've demonstrated, yes, I understood, what my requirements are, then the next thing they want to know, okay, are you actually doing that? Are you following this procedure as documented? So that's when they're going to start asking for, all right, show me the records, show me the proof that you produced this thing. It says you're going to take these steps. Where's your record of having done it that way? It says at the end, you should have gotten these outputs. Show me those outputs, right? Prove to me that your employees are actually following this procedure as documented. And then assuming that is all good, you've demonstrated you understood the requirements and your people are actually doing it, then the final piece is, well, how good is it, right? Is it effective? Is it really getting to what the intent of having that process is in the first place? And this is where it's going to become a little more quantitative. They'll want to see, so tell me about your monitoring, your metrics, right? And, your failure rates, things like that, to say, is it a good process? It's great. It's a documented process. It's a process that's followed, but is it a good process? That's the level or the thinking that goes into what the auditor is doing. Make sure everybody's understanding the requirements. Are we doing it? And then does it work effectively? All right. So a big part of this is avoiding what I call the please dig here flags. Auditors come in with kind of a broad scope. I'll talk about this a little bit later. They kind of start at a very high level. And what they're looking for are the indicators of where to go, where to really dig, right? Because there's other than the FDA who can stay for as long as they like, other, auditors usually, right, you have a set timeline and they've got to get a certain amount of work done in that timeline. And there's a lot to look at, depending on the size of your organization, its complexity, it's a lot to fit in, to the days that are allocated for it. So they need to figure out where to prioritize. They start at a high level and they're looking for the clues that say, this is where I should dig further. So some of those kind of things that are easy to avoid, but too often are not, are things like being disorganized, right? Looking, disheveled. I give an example here of a bookcase. This is not the exact pictures, but I had this happen. I was doing a lab audit and I walked into the lab and we're going to be looking at good laboratory practices and how they manage the lab. But as soon as I walked in, off to the side, I could see this bookcase that looked like the one on the left. And I just stopped everybody right there. And I said, what's that? And they went, oh, that's everybody's training records. And I went, oh, you know what? Before we look at the lab, let's go take a look at your training process, your training management process, because that looks really bad. And I want to understand how you're managing that, how that's effective. That's a please dig here flag. We weren't going in there to talk about training management. Now we are, right? Just because you're messy. Kind of thing. Next, inconsistency. Auditors like to see things be consistent. So the example I'm showing on here in these pictures, right, is something that's either done through manual assembly or automated assembly. It's not that either of those are good or bad. And there may be valid reasons for, well, we produce these parts for this customer through manual methods. This customer, we do it automated. And it may be because customer A, the volumes aren't high enough to justify putting it on the automated line. That's fine. Just understand when you have things that could be the same or maybe should be the same and they're not, that is going to catch auditors' attention. And you need to be thinking about, are we intentionally inconsistent here for valid reasons? Or is this an opportunity where we really should be doing something the same way? The other place this tends to come out is when you have multiple sites. And I've had that happen where I'm looking at two sites in the same company and they're essentially doing the same thing, but they each have their own procedures, which could be okay. But the same procedure for the same process is 95% the same. And then there's this 5% difference that makes no sense. And you just kind of go, why would one site add that requirement, the other site doesn't? It's just going to raise those kind of questions that from an auditor, they're going to go, tell me why this site thinks it doesn't have to do something the other site that's doing the exact same stuff thinks it has to do. You're going to, that's that please dig here flag, and you're going to distract the auditor and they're going to go down pathways maybe you didn't want them to go down. Typos and grammar errors, right? Those are usually fairly obvious. And again, no auditor walks in going, I'm looking for typos today. They're just going to come across them. As they're looking at all that evidence, all those records and documents, they're likely to find that kind of stuff. And it's, when I'm auditing, I find one typo. All right, typos happen, right? 2, all right, 3. So I go, oh, somebody forgot to turn on spell check. If I start seeing, a pattern here, lots of typos, grammar is not particularly good, the layout of the document is hard to follow, that's going to get me digging, right? And the example would be if I'm looking at a document and it's just full of typos and bad grammar, I'm going to turn around, I'm going to go, you know what, I'd like to see the change record for this and all the people that signed off on it, who reviewed and approved this. And then I'd like you to pull all of their training records. And in particular, I want to see how they were trained to do document reviews. Oh, and then I'd like to see your document review procedure, wherever that exists, and I want to understand that better. Please dig here, right? Now we're down a pathway that, may not have been directly related at all to what we were doing. There was a question here about any guidance on best practices for outside or outsourced processes. I'd have to think about that. I'll probably have to get back to you and see if there's anything good out there in that regard. When you talk about outsourcing right now, you're into your supply chain management process. And it comes down to, the relationship you have with that supplier, the contract you've put in place. And have you vetted that supplier's quality system? Have you done your audit of them to see if they get all this stuff? Or do you need to help them with that, right? You're maybe more capable, more mature. We all sometimes deal with that where we've got this supplier is essentially a mom and pop shop. They don't have the resources necessarily to do what we need them to do, but they are the ones who can do the job, right? And so then we have to sort of step in and help out understanding these things and help them to learn all of that. How would I handle excessive typos? Like I said, I'd go back to looking at, have we actually ever trained anybody? Who's responsible for finding them? Do we even know that in our process, right? Who's supposed to watch for that in the process? Because when you do a document review, when a change request comes through and there's 6 people that have to review and approve it, they're not all doing the same review. They shouldn't need 6 people to do the same review. They should each have a different role. Have you defined that somewhere in your process, in your change management process, that, the doc control department or quality is responsible for looking for things like typos and format, using the right template, that kind of thing, right? Pagination. But then the person who's in engineering, right, they're supposed to look at the technical content, and the person in regulatory is supposed to be looking at any, right? You should be laying that out so that they don't just walk in and make an assumption about what am I looking for, or worse yet, the old, oh, I see Joe already looked at this. He's pretty sharp, so I'm just going to rubber stamp it and go, it's good, right? Without actually doing anything. Let's see, we've got a longer one here, one from paper-based system, because we're uploading all relevant files in the doc control module, ease of access. Yeah, main page, it references reports, and those can be uploaded. This will be a large undertaking, is worth it from the perspective of right now, in full transparency, the files are very difficult to find and organize, and I want to fix it. So that's like a quality systems kind of question that I would cover in another topic, but it's all about architecting your quality system, which not only makes it easier to audit, it makes it easier to manage and to deal with things like this. All right. So spelling counts, right? Your grade school teachers weren't kidding. Spelling matters. Okay. And then the obvious one, hopefully, post-it notes. When we're walking around a facility and doing audits, we're always looking for whether it's post-its or handwritten signs, or even things that look like official signs, but we realize they're not controlled and they're on things that, why is this sign here? Shouldn't this be in the work instruction or the procedure? And the problem is post-it notes are unofficial. They don't stay on very well. That's their whole point, right? Is they're supposed to be removable. If they're conveying important information, then why isn't that just documented formally? And then if there's a value to having signage, then the signage should be controlled as well. But yeah, we love looking for those little yellow stickers all over the place because it tells us that somewhere there's a process not being followed as documented. All right, so the idea of process auditing and inspecting. So as I said, auditors come in and they see the bigger picture first, right? They're looking at the entire quality system. That's why they want to ask for your quality manual. They want to see how things are connected. Do you have a process model? Are you applying a process approach? And then they're going to dive into, they're going to have certain priorities in terms of major processes. If you're FDA regulated, they follow a process called the Quality System Inspection Technique, or QSIT, which relies on an approach called CAPA plus 1 or 2, meaning they're always going to look at your CAPA process, and then they're going to look at 1 or 2 of the other major process areas like design controls or production controls. And then from there, it's open game, right? They're going to look for the please dig here flags to take them. This is why they often can't tell you where they're going with the audit. Or the inspection. They're going to start at a higher level and they're going to see what they can find. And they're going to look for what flags tell them to go into other areas. But they'll start with some primary areas. So we always start big picture, process thinking, and then we follow the process and say, let's see where this takes us. Then, like I said, they're looking for those please dig here flags to say, where is it they should go deeper? As I said, no auditor shows up going, I'm doing a typo audit today, right? Or, we were very much, it's important to do software validation, but typically that's not the primary focus of an audit. They may get there, right? If they're looking at, how you're doing your doc control function, and you do that through an EQMS, and they start seeing just a lot of mistakes, of things that are managed by the system itself, per the earlier posters, comments about that it's very complex to get certain documents and records into that system. If it all starts to look like it's falling apart, then they're going to start, that's a please dig here going, tell me about this system you're using, this EQMS. And now tell me about how you tested it. How'd you validate it? That's when they'll get into that kind of thing. Calibration tags. Yes, we always tend to look at calibration tags, but that's not the point of our audit. We're trying to understand the processes and is it being followed, job descriptions, all these kind of things. A lot of times, yes, the devil's in the details. You got to get them right, but that's not where an auditor is going to start. They're going to start at a high level, and these are the things that might distract them and make them dig into holes you didn't want to get into. All right, so we just had a bunch more pop up here. Have I experienced recently a lack of qualified auditors or a dumbing down of auditing process to make it easier to audit? I guess I haven't seen that. I do know, particularly in the regulated space, like if you're involved with the EU medical device regulations and getting like an ISO 1345 certification, the number of available notification bodies went down a lot. And everybody wants to get back on the EU market and show that they're, complying with the regulations, but they're under the gun and they don't have enough auditors. I don't know if that means that there are less qualified auditors involved. They certainly aren't making the process simpler in that case. In a lot of cases, they're actually being more prescriptive to the auditors as to how they have to conduct the audit and the amount of time required. So I haven't seen that as a trend. And the please dig here plans, what about excessive complexity in a process, like not having a cross-reference step for approving adverse events list in the IFU with an RMP? I don't know if that falls under the please dig here, but again, your quality system is supposed to be based on a process approach. And they're going to look for those interconnections, right? So the cross references might be a form of that. Going, great. If these two processes are supposed to feed one another or feed off of each other, tell me where it is that those connections happen. If I can't find them, then yeah, I'm probably going to dig a little deeper into how are you actually making that connection happen then. Let's see, any advice for dealing with an auditor that cannot see that there are more than one way to fulfill requirements? All right, yeah, that's a tough one when the auditor kind of comes from a certain background and experiences and they have their biases. We do our best, right? We're supposed to be unbiased in providing our feedback, but it does happen. You know, every auditor has their hot button. I'm going to talk a little bit later about managing your auditor. So maybe we hold off on this question and see if anything comes out of that. But yeah, let's come back to that a little later. We'll talk about managing the auditor and see if that helps out at all. All right. What specific about job descriptions would be a please dig here flag? Well, it all gets back to the idea that you have to demonstrate that you have competent personnel. One of the ways you do that is by looking at job descriptions and saying, do they lay out the required competencies? And then looking at your people and say, do they meet those competencies? So again, I never walk into an audit going, yeah, I'm going to look at a bunch of job descriptions today. But as I'm trying to understand how well a process works, and I find a process maybe that's not as effective or successful as it should be, and then I'm wondering why is that, and is it related to the competency of the people performing the process? Then I'm going to go down and go, you know what, let me go see how their jobs were defined, and then do they actually meet those requirements? So that's one way the job descriptions can become a please dig here flag. All right, thanks for all those questions. They're excellent. All right, and then this one, this fear that the auditor is going to step outside their bounds and audit things outside the quality system. Like an employee handbook. I had this happen at a client. It came out verbally that part of onboarding included making sure every employee, that they walk them through the employee handbook. And I said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, because the handbook can be important about, establishing what the company does and how we do it and those kind of things. And so I asked to see a copy of the handbook, and they kind of like stiffened up, like, it's not part of the quality system. And I said, that's okay. I'm just curious, since you verbally mentioned that that's part of helping people understand the context within which they're working. And then I raised the question, I go, and why don't you call that out in your process that talks about how to onboard an employee? You don't actually mention that. And they said, because we don't want anybody doing what you're doing right now. We don't want an auditor asking to inspect our handbook. And I said, they're not going to inspect it. They just want to understand the stuff that's in there. And again, why would that be a big fear area? If you're doing it right, it's a good thing. It's an add-on. We understand how to onboard people. And matter of fact, look, we carried it through to our employee handbook. I would want to brag about that rather than hide it. Business procedures. It's not likely the auditors are going to go, they're not going to go look at your financial systems and your results. They're not, unless they're there as a SOX auditor, but for a quality system auditor. And it's okay to say, within your quality system procedures, to point to something in another management system, right? To show that there is a connection there. Again, I think that's a good thing that auditors will respond positively to. It doesn't mean like, oh, you opened the door for me, I'm stepping through. Now I'm going to audit all your accounting principles. That isn't what's going to happen there. But it helps see that you are putting together an entire system. A couple of questions popped up here. Are QMS changes like converting a supplier to a customer? Please dig here topics. Yeah, you need to understand what those changes are, right? As part of your manager review process, right? Usually one of the required areas to talk about changes that can affect the quality system, and things like changing suppliers, changing the nature of the relationship with a supplier or a customer. So there should be something in your organizational change management process that lets you vet those kind of things, or assess or evaluate those kind of changes to go, what should we be doing formally about that? And does that become a CAPA? Does it just become an NC? Is it just part of preventive action? You should have something built in that lets you capture those things and assess them for the level of risk and then the level of action required. How to satisfy observations that would require major investment that could take 2+ years, such as restart. All right. So yeah, this kind of gets into how to respond to audit findings, which we're not really covering today, but I will say, yeah, sometimes, right, findings in an audit are typically systemic. They should be more systemic than anything else, which means they're going to probably require quite a bit of effort. And sometimes it's like, yeah, we're going to have to like buy a new ERP system, and that's going to take a while. We're going to go through the budgeting process. And that's okay to say, look, we understand the nature of this problem is bigger, right? And so we need to take a big action. But you can't just say, so come back to us in 2 years and we'll tell you how it went. What they're going to say is, great, start working on that. What are you doing in the interim? What are your mitigations that you're going to do because you're probably doing that because something's not right. So in the meantime, you're going to stick your finger in the hole and plug it up for now. Tell me what that looks like over time and how you're going to monitor and manage that. And you'll get credit for that. The next time another auditor comes in, they go, oh, you got a problem with this. Yeah, show them your plan, right? Have the plan available. Here's the plan. But in the interim, we're doing these things to offset, some of the issues going on. So you want to be able to share that kind of information with the auditor. All right, let me just continue on here. All right, so getting ready here. All right. Now,
all right,
poll here.
Yeah, we're doing a quick poll. We just want to know take a pulse from everyone. How prepared do you and your organization feel for your next audit or an inspection? Maybe you're always ready. You've got great systems in place and it's not an issue. Maybe you're dreading this, but you've got some tools going, you're making progress. Or are you panicking? You're just really not prepared. You're here to really just get some serious help. We'll kind of give everybody a few minutes and see where we're at. We've got about half of the attendees accounted for at the moment. So we'll just give it a little bit more time. You really want to hear what you're feeling right now. All right. Well, it looks like about half and half where they're always ready. You're always ready. That's great. Great place to be in. Or you're kind of, not quite 100% about the audit, but you're making some progress. And only a couple 2% are panicking. So that's great to hear. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, Steve, back to you.
Yeah. Sorry if you could hear the scratching at the door, but somebody gets really annoyed when I shut off my office. So. All right, let's move on. The joys of Zoom. Okay. All right, first things first, the reason we asked that question, okay? If an auditor inspection announcement creates panic in your organization, you're not ready. You don't even have to do an evaluation. It shouldn't. If you've got a decently defined and well-executed quality management system, then audits shouldn't create this panic in you. Again, you should be going, yeah, okay, yeah, great. It'd be great to have somebody look at this. Or, I know it gets a little annoying because it just takes time and resources. But again, when I've been involved with organizations that have strong quality cultures, audits and inspections are just I know we got to do them. And it's not that, oh, we have to do them. It's that, yeah, we know we're going to go through this and that's fine. We're ready. So this becomes a do not pass go kind of thing. If your organization always has this panic, this mad scramble when there's going to be an audit or inspection, you know what the first thing to fix is. You need to fix that culture. You need to fix your quality system. Usually organizations know what's wrong with their quality system. Every once in a while you capture something and they're totally surprised that they were misunderstanding or not doing something. But again, if there's this general sense of dread when an audit is announced, you should be going back, management should be going back and going, why is that? That shouldn't be the case. Let's see, I'm going to look at a couple of questions. What makes a procedure or form controlled? Controlled means that it is reviewed and approved in whatever your change management system is. Let's see, we got someone is in the process of implementing a new ERP system. Our external surveillance audit is scheduled for shortly after that. So we're going to have all the process updated. All right, go. A lot of times doing internal audits. How can we protect ourselves from anything major? So if to paraphrase that, right? So they're putting in a new ERP system. It's going to go live shortly before their next surveillance audit, right? So the dust may not have settled yet. I would make sure there's just a really good quality plan, implementation plan for that system that lays out what are we doing to validate that system? Assuming that the system goes live 3 weeks before the surveillance audit, that means you've completed that testing, and so you should have records to show we did test this. We know what works. We bugs and things we're going to refine, and here's the updated plan for getting that right. Always show. It is always better to show that you know where the problems are and you're doing something about them than to act like you're surprised. Oh, we didn't know that was a problem, right? That's when the auditors are going to dig deeper. But if you're able to show, oh yeah, we've got a process here, we've got a plan, we've already recognized things that, the dust hasn't quite settled yet, and here's what we're doing to get there. We didn't just go, yeah, we went live and all's good and we moved on, and now you tell us where the problems are, right? So it's, show your plan. It'll save you a lot of consternation on the side. How do you fix your quality culture when it's been bad for so long? That sounds like another webinar to do, maybe an entire workshop. That's a big topic to try to cover here. Quality culture shift is not easy. All right. Is it typical for contract organizations to manage client processes in multiple markets? Utilize shared building procedure staff to install quality systems that accommodate both sets of regs. Okay, yeah. So yeah, a lot of organizations have multiple masters, right? They have to be both 9001 and 1345 and maybe 14001, right? It does make it challenging, and it sometimes reflects in the quality culture. I've had, been through lots of organizations that has kind of a regulated and a non-regulated side. And if the culture has allowed for that distinction that everybody sees, like, well, I don't work on the regulated side, so I don't have to do that, right? You start getting that kind of culture in place. And so your best bet is to go, which of these is going to be most, okay, we'll call it burdensome, right? Or have the most requirements. The requirements on the regulated side are not like nasty hoops that the regulatory bodies think is funny to make you jump through. If you understand why they're there, you start to go, well, that makes sense. That's what you'd want to do, even if you weren't regulated. So you should be able to apply it across the non-regulated side of your business as well, or your sites. It's just go, these are the right things to do. I'm a bit of a heretic at times in saying things like, remember, the auditors don't work here. You run your business the right way. You know what you're supposed to do. If you're in a regulated business, it's probably because it means there's a risk related to your product. Well, you don't want that to happen, right? For one, you don't want to hurt anybody, and you certainly don't want the legal liabilities and the financial liabilities of that. So do the right thing. Even if the reg doesn't tell you you have to do it, go beyond that. Remember, regs and standards are the minimum requirements, not the maximums.
All right, Steve, I might jump in and maybe we'll get to the questions towards the end because we're running short on time.
All right, yeah, so, a lot of good questions.
Thank you, everyone, though. Please keep them coming.
Yeah, we got them on the screen, so hopefully we can get back to them. All right, so general readiness stuff. Let's get into that. It goes as without saying, right? Whatever procedures you've got should be up to date. And even if they haven't reviewed in a while, there should be something that indicates that when they were last reviewed. I went to a place once and they had a bunch of SOPs that had been written 12 years before, and there was no indication they'd ever looked at them again. It's hard to believe that in 12 years, something didn't change that would have affected that process. And if it's not, then fine, show me that you know that and how you know that. But it's going to look odd. There's no formal requirement for periodic review, but it's considered a best practice, right? That in your doc control process, you should be doing something like a 2 or 3 year review of documents if they haven't otherwise changed in that time period. As I alluded to before, employees certainly have to be trained, but training is a component of competency. You have to be able to demonstrate competency. There's no actual requirement for training management in any of the standards. They all talk to competency and then say part of competency might include training, right? But we tend to focus just on training management. So one, you're going to want to make sure for sure that training is up to date for everybody. Everybody's up to date on their training requirements. You can produce those records easily, but then you need to think about, then how are we going to demonstrate competence? Because training is only one component of competence. Just always remember the please dig here flags, right? You're aware of them. Start straightening things out. Make sure everything looks neat and clean, right? Just don't provide those opportunities. And then your employees need to be aware of your quality policy and be able to explain it, not recite it. Often what I do is I'm walking around and I'm meeting employees. I will ask them, tell me about your quality policy. I don't want them to stiffen up and start reciting it to me, right? Or grab their badge and flip it over because it's on the back of their badge and read it to me. I want you to tell me what it means. And that's right. The requirement that employees are aware of the quality policy. That's what that means, that they just aren't aware that it exists and what it says, that they understand how to apply that, which then gets into the next one is that they also need to be aware of any quality objectives and the role they play in those quality objectives. So the other thing I like to ask employees that are on, meet during an audit is tell me about the company's quality policies that you affect. And I too often get a head tilt. And they're going, "What? Oh, I'm just a production operator. I just run this machine. I don't have anything to do with the company's quality objectives." That's the wrong answer, right? Employees need, right? They all are participants in some way to the quality objectives, and there should be a structure or a hierarchy to those objectives that goes from the very top, but this is the corporation's trying to do, and eventually down to people's individual objectives. And there should be some traceability back to that. So think about how you connect up those things and then make sure people understand what their role is and their level of impact. All right, you should have a procedure on how to manage audits and inspections. Simple things. Who's the first person they meet? Particularly if you're in an FDA regulated industry, right, where they can show up unannounced, and now your notified bodies can do the same thing. Does the receptionist know what to do when an FDA inspector walks in the door unannounced? Right. The first thing is, do they know who to call? Who do I contact? Right? Who's supposed to be told that there's an unannounced audit happening? And if they don't answer their phone or their emails, then who's the next person on the list? Right. There should be this hierarchy set up that goes, here's how we handle the communications. How are we going to tell everybody else in the building? Hey, FDA just showed up. Everybody should be ready so they can put their binders on the shelf correctly. They can pull down their post-it notes. That shouldn't be there in the first place, right? But you should have a way, know, how am I going to communicate this to the organization? Hey, we have an audit going on. So be aware of that. Make sure everything's in place. Watch what you're saying in the hallways, right? All that kind of stuff. Where are you going to conduct the audit? What room are you going to go to? Have you thought about that? Now, this gets tougher in small organizations. You don't have a lot of space. But if you have any sort of facility with conference rooms you'd want to think of, which one is the one we're always going to use? You should make people aware of, hey, be aware. If there's an unannounced audit, whatever meetings you have scheduled in that room, you're getting the boot, right? And then what's in that room that will help us support, the audit in terms of equipment and anything else we might need. Do we need two rooms? Do we often use a front room, back room kind of approach? We meet with the auditor in the front room. In the back room is all the people who are scurrying around, pulling up documents and records and getting them ready per the requests. And then how are you going to make that stuff available? You should have that proceduralized. We're always going to provide hard copy. We're going to print everything out. Okay. If we're going to print everything out, which printer are we going to dedicate to that? Because I don't want to be waiting for a printout while somebody else decided to print out a 100-page document. Is there enough paper in the printer? Is there, toner, things like that? Or are we just going to put them up on a screen? Great. Have we tried that out? Is it a big enough screen to see things? I don't know how many times I've gone on audits and everybody says, oh, we'll just pull it up on the screen. And it's a 27-inch monitor on a conference room. I'm going, all right, I'm going to have to stand and stare right at it. Or are you going to provide direct access? Now, I don't know that I would do this with an FDA inspector, but when I perform internal audits for my clients, a lot of times, either they just give me access to a SharePoint folder and go, hey, we'll just pop everything there and you can read it at your leisure. Or in some cases, they give me an account on their eQMS system and I can just log in and search for what I need. And I can do a lot of that asynchronously then and not have to make people stare at me reading stuff. But again, for your notified bodies, your FDA, I don't know that I'd ever give direct access. All right, so we got another poll question here.
All right. So we want to know where are you currently organizing the documents that you might need to show an auditor during an audit? Maybe you're using sheets of paper, pretty manual filing cabinets with papers that you got to search for. Maybe you got spreadsheets stored on a shared drive somewhere. Maybe you have a DMS a dedicated document management software solution. Maybe you have an EQMS in place already, similar to Intellect, or maybe you store these docs in other systems like your ERP and MES. We'd love to know, select more than one if that applies. We'd like to see kind of where everyone is at in storing their documents that they need for audits. All right, we've got about half who've answered the poll question. We'd love to hear from as many people as possible. All right. All right, well, let's see where everyone's at. Let's see here. We've got an even distribution. So we still have people that are using paper. We've got the majority using spreadsheets or shared drive. Some do have a dedicated document management solution. About 37% have an EQMS in place already, and then another 20% using other systems. Thank you very much for sharing.
Great. I'm a former IT guy early in my career, so I'm a big fan of electronic records and getting away from paper. I just think that's a better way to go. This isn't anywhere in the slides. There used to be kind of a feeling that, don't let the auditor see the systems, right? In that back room, we'll go get them something, we'll print it on paper and just show it to them. Again, understanding that more and more the focus is on the process of how you're producing this. I've actually found that it works usually better to put everything up on a screen and go, yeah, here's our doc control system. Boom. Show how you have control of things. That's assuming you have good control, but you should. And then you should be proud of that and go, yeah, let's just show you how we retrieve documents here. Ask us a question. We'll find it for you right in this system. So I think that's a good way to go. In terms of, again, continuing on this, having a proceduralized approach to this, understanding the different roles, kind of like I talked about the different roles in reviewing a document. In an audit or inspection, right? Somebody takes the lead. Somebody takes all the notes, what we might call a scribe. Somebody manages the back room, and who's going to be in the back room and what are they responsible for? Somebody who's got to go find the documents. Somebody who's going to review them before we give them to the auditor or the inspector. But all of those roles should be laid out somewhere so that everybody knows we got the message. There's an audit. Boom. We all know what to do. What records of the audit are you going to keep? Is somebody going to keep a log of all the requests? Are you going to log what time was the request made? What time was it fulfilled? There's not a requirement for that, but do you want to know that, right? To kind of do metrics on your ability to manage audits. Is somebody going to keep a log, kind of like a court record of everything the auditor asked and who answered the question and what was the answer provided, so you can go back and look at that transcript. There are going to be opening and closing meetings. Are you establishing who needs to be there at those meetings? Ideally, right, there is this requirement that management is to demonstrate its commitment to the quality system. A great way to do that is if executive management actually shows up for these meetings to show that they are interested in what about the audit and about its results. Place I worked, it had a great culture around this, and whenever we had an audit of any kind, the CEO and his entire team, if they were in town, they were at the opening and closing meetings. And it was the CEO who actually started the meeting and explaining to the auditor, we're happy you're here. This is what our company does. And they gave the initial presentation. Auditors were typically blown away by this, that they couldn't believe all these VPs would take the time out to sit through the opening and closing meetings. They would ask questions. They would be positive about the fact that the audit was going on. That's part of showing your culture is pretty strong. Do you know who all the subject matter experts are that you might have to call on? Are they aware that they might get called on? If they're not available, do you know who the backup subject matter expert is, right? You should know. There should be a list somewhere that says, the person we first call when they ask about calibration is this person. And if they're out of town or not available, then the next person we contact in that department is this person. But you should have that somewhere. And then you should have a company overview. Again, auditors are often new to your organization, new to your facility. So a quick presentation, what the company does, what gets done at this facility, maybe a diagram of the facility layout, right? So they understand how things are structured. What does the org chart look like from a functional perspective? Maybe a quick, lead into your quality manual about what standards and regs apply to you. how are you doing against your competitors? Not necessarily financial information, but where do you guys fit in the industry, that kind of thing. That helps the auditor get that context so they understand what do you do, what do you not do, what are the level of risks involved, so that they understand, right? Where do they take their audit focus from there? All right, we were going to talk about managing the auditor and the inspector. When you find out who's coming, go out and research them. Google, LinkedIn, Facebook. Okay, go see what are their hobbies, what are they into, what's their background. If you're doing, if you're prone to FDA inspections, there's a site called FDA Zilla. It's expensive, but it has lots of really good detail about each FDA inspector, like what inspections have they done recently, what findings did they write up. You get a sense for where their hot buttons are. So if you have a lot of attention from the FDA Zilla subscription there might be good. Talking to the people at other companies. Hey, we're going to have an audit by this guy, this person. Have you ever experienced an audit with them? You know what their hot buttons are. So you want to get into that. The LinkedIn ping, finding out their background can be really important. You may look at it and go in the inspector and go, oh, before this person became an auditor and inspector, they spent a lot of time in sterilization. That means they're probably going to ask some really hard questions about sterilization. So I better be ready for that if that's applicable to me. So a lot of good information out there. Take advantage of that so that you get ready and can think, what might this person be focused on? What kind of things are they likely to ask us about? All right, confirming, right? Confirm how do they want to handle meals and beverages and stuff, right? How many breaks do you think they're going to want to take? Are they okay if you bring in bagels and coffee? For lunch, are they going to go out? Do they want you to bring something in? Are they going to eat in the cafeteria? It's always nice to ask with FDA. They're going to tell you they're okay with things like water and coffee and bagels in the room. They're not going to let you buy them lunch or anything else. Generally, they will leave to do that. And once during an audit that was going on for weeks with FDA, they did start eating in our cafeteria, but they insisted, right? We said, oh, we'll get you coupons for that. And they were like, no, we will pay for that. And that raises a whole nother question. If they decide to eat in your facility, how do you want to manage that? Do you want to make them come back to the room with their meals? Are you going to let them eat in the cafeteria with everybody else? Are you going to set aside a table and rope it off? You need to think about, right, these logistics, because they can become important. Remember, the audit never takes a pause, right? Even if it's lunch break, whatever they see when they're eating their lunch or moving around the facility to get lunch, that's all fair game during the audit or the inspection. With FDA inspectors, someone should be watching for their arrival. The audit doesn't be, or the inspection doesn't begin when they walk in the door. The inspection begins before that and could begin the moment they drive into your parking lot. I've heard lots of good stories from FDA inspectors of them walking around a building first. They're not immune to doing some dumpster diving, peeking in windows to get a sense of what's going on before they actually walk into the facility. And then at the end of the day, when they leave, somebody should escort them out and watch them leave the premises so they don't start wandering around unescorted outside the building where there could be things that maybe you didn't think to control well. So you definitely want to watch for that. And when an FDA inspector gets there, ask for their credentials. They're used to being asked that question. It's not rude. And don't let the fact that what they're going to show you includes a badge freak you out. If you've never been through an FDA inspection, they carry badges. They have kind of a bifold, and it's on one side, it's kind of got their ID card. On the other side, though, is a badge. Okay, so don't freak out about that. That's just the nature of who they are and what they do. All right, let's talk about common pitfalls here. So the do's on the positive side. Be professional, right? We're courteous, we're respectful, we are happy the auditor's there, right? We respect their professionalism as we want them to respect ours. When you get asked a question, make sure you're listening. Hear the gist of the question. What do you think they're actually looking for in answering? So there's no need to be fast. You want to listen. Maybe you want to ask for clarification. That's okay, right? It's common inspector and auditor ask vague or open-ended questions. They want to see where you'll go with it. So if they're not very clear, you might want to come back and go, yeah, I'm not really sure what you're looking for there. Can you clarify the question? Or can you give me an example of, what you're looking for there? Right? Be smart. Don't let them trick you into just opening up and flooding a bunch of stuff. Always, oops, sorry, that fell into the picture there, but be prepared to concisely describe your organization and its processes. You're the department manager, you come in, a lot of times for me, at least, I'll say, all right, so tell me what you do here. What does your department do? I better be prepared to talk about really quickly. Oh, my department's responsible for this, this, and this. We follow these processes, and here's where we fit in. Just something that says, yeah, I'm on top of this. I know what my group does, kind of thing. Just always a good idea, right? Anybody who gets called in to talk to the auditor inspector, before you walk out the door to go to the room, just grab your procedure up, make sure I'm up to date, nothing new that I forgot about, right? No surprises in there. Then when you do answer, stick to the point of the question, answer concisely. Now that doesn't mean yes, no, yeah, right? That looks evasive unless it's clearly a yes, no question. But otherwise, think about, I understand what they want, what they're looking for. I'm going to think of a nice, concise answer, a full sentence. I'm going to tell them what they need to know. I'm going to stick to the facts, and I'm going to wait to see if they ask me for clarification. So I'm not going to expand on that. I'm not going to go on a long diatribe or a long explanation. Yep, I understand what they're looking to understand. Here's my answer. And in everything, you convey confidence and a sense of pride in your organization and its processes. And I don't care whether or not things are all screwy in your organization. This is not your time to share that. You have full confidence in what you're doing. And again, everything we do here has a purpose, and we understand the why, and we think we're good at it. All right, the don'ts. And I apologize. It does look like we're running long here, but
we could go over. Yeah, we want to get through this. We'll go over, and we'll if that's okay with you.
A little bit over. But all right, the don'ts. Don't get into arguments with your auditor. Don't get into debates. Okay, particularly FDA inspectors. They are well trained. They do know the regulations better than you do. All right, and they know what FDA wants out of them. Your notified bodies. Usually, they're to the question earlier about whether there are less qualified auditors appearing. Again, I haven't run into that, at least not on the side that's closer to the regulated spaces like ISO 1345, MDSAP, MDR, those kind of audits. They usually are bringing pretty good people. So I'd be really careful about trying to tell the auditor, oh no, you're misinterpreting the requirement there. That's probably not going to get you very far, and probably just going to create a please dig here flag, frankly. Don't volunteer anything. Again, per the previous slide, understand the question, understand the type of answer that's needed, give that answer, and stop. Okay, don't offer anything else beyond that. Never alter any requested documents. Right, so the call goes to the back room. Auditor wants to see this log. You pull that log up, and there's a bunch of blank cells, and stuff isn't there, and that's what it is. That's what you're going to present. You certainly want to let the front room know, hey, we're sending this log up, and it's got a bunch of holes in it. At least they're aware of it, but don't ever try to, all right, quick, here, type in some numbers, type in some information. Especially in an FDA inspection. Remember, they are federal officers, and it would be a felony to lie to a federal officer. So you present what's there, but you certainly want to be aware of what you're about to present. Don't go on this thing, oh, well, that could never happen. Oh man, that's a please dig here flag. They're gonna make you explain, how do you know that? How do you ensure that? Prove it, which is tough to do, right? So just be careful about, kind of that hyperbole and going too far to the extremes. And if you're not the expert, or you don't quite know the answer, even if it is your area, but it's like they catch you off guard on something, you go, oh, I don't really have that handy. It is perfectly okay to say, you know what, I don't know for sure. Let me go either find somebody or go find that information for you, and I'll get back to you. That's okay. You don't have to look like you have encyclopedic knowledge of everything that's going on. And certainly don't answer questions that are outside your area. I've been through that. I had that happen to me once. I was in an audit, and I got asked a question, And the guy leading the audit decided he was going to answer for me, and he answered wrong. That created a very tough situation there. More don'ts. Don't make generalizations. That's kind of along the lines of that can never happen, but that always works that way. And that kind of stuff. It's not about opinion. You always want to present facts and don't overgeneralize things. Again, this is not the time to air dirty laundry. Well, yeah, that process would work better if we had enough resources, but okay. Remember, providing adequate resources is one of the requirements. So you've just given a please dig here flag, right? This is not the time to air your grievances that you can't get your management to pay attention to. That would not be very ethical to do it that way. Be careful about the silent pauses. That's pretty typical inspector and auditor technique. Ask you a question, get an answer. They look at their notes, they look around the room, they look at you. You start to sweat, get nervous, and you get tense, and you go, and you start adding this additional stuff, right? You've got to be prepared for that. There's going to be those silent pauses. Look, I understood the question. I gave you the answer. If you want something more, I'm going to wait for you to say something. Be careful of the overly nice auditor inspector. Now, there should be some social aspects to this, but it can be a technique of getting you to like them, right? And so they seem really nice people and just really cool. And that sometimes is a ploy that if you're comfortable, you may share more stuff with them than you normally would. So just be careful about that. Be careful about how many people are in the room and who they are. Again, your procedure should say who absolutely needs to be there, person running it, the scribe, and whoever the subject matter experts are. I know there's often a lot of people in management want to observe and sit in. That can be dangerous, right? Because then they might feel that need to chime in. Really their time to do so. Or it can be seen as you're trying to intimidate the auditor. And you don't want that to come off that way either. And also have a procedure for what to do when the auditor's got to be by themselves or something like that. You're the person leading the audit and you need to take a bathroom break. Okay. So you're going to leave and you're supposedly the expert on how to manage the audit. Who else is going to be left in that room with that auditor? Be careful. I've had an FDA inspector use that opportunity to get to something I'm going to talk about here in a second, which was to get somebody to sign an affidavit that they should not have signed. So think about that. How are you going to handle those breaks and who's in the room with the auditor while you're gone? And as I said, that last thing, if you're in an FDA inspection, your procedure, everybody needs to be trained on this, that they are never, ever, ever to sign anything presented by the inspector. Matter of fact, they shouldn't even read it. Okay, because the FDA inspector in their notes, if they hand you something, go, hey, would you look at this? And you read it, they are going to note that you are aware of the contents of that document, regardless of whether you signed it or not. Let's put it this way. If you're in an FDA inspection and they ask you to sign something, that's a things are not going well sign. Okay. The correct response is, I'm not authorized to take that or to sign it, but I'd be happy to get legal here. That's your answer. Okay. No matter how much they push, you need to remind them, no, our procedure says that I'm not allowed to accept anything from you for signature. All right, back to managing the auditor and the inspector here. Again, anywhere they're going to go, you go with them. Somebody goes with them, okay? Because remember, the audit never takes a break. The inspection never takes a break. So they got to take a bathroom break. You're obviously not going into the stall with them, but take them to the restroom. Make sure nobody else is in the restroom. Let them go in. You stand out in the hallway. Don't let anybody else in, okay? Just make sure, right? Because they can talk to anybody they want to talk to. They can look at anything they want to go. Just because you said, oh, the bathroom's down the hall, make a left and a right, that doesn't mean that's where they're going to go. You're going to leave them alone, they'll wander. Okay? I've done that in audits myself, and I'm not an FDA inspector, where we have multiple auditors, and one auditor is sort of distracting the team, and they're all kind of gathered around him, and I go wander off to somewhere else in the room or in the facility, and then suddenly they're going, where'd the other auditor go? It's like, because I felt like going somewhere without somebody peering over my shoulder and see what I could find out. So you need to be aware of those kind of things and make sure everybody's escorted. If they ask for records and it's not obvious why they're asking, then ask for an explanation, right? If they're reviewing your calibration process, management process, and they ask for calibration records, that's pretty obvious. But if they're doing something else and suddenly they say, I'd like to see some examples of this, and you go, I have dots here, then you'd want to ask, going, oh, what are you looking for there? Because you don't want to give them the wrong thing, first of all, right? Because that could become a please dig here flag. They ask you for something and maybe it's a test to see how you interpret that. So if it's not really obvious what it is they're asking for or why they're asking for it, ask. Help me understand so I get you the right thing. Just you're trying to be helpful is the messaging there. Keep reminding them of what it is your organization does. We're a small supplier, or we're a class 1, medical device manufacturer, or we're a manufacturer of these low risk products. Just keep that scope in front of them, because they can get their own biases or they can get off track. I worked for a company that was software as a medical device, and we had an auditor come in, and I guess she loved production controls. Well, in software, there's not a lot of production controls. Yeah, we were back in the day of burning DVDs, and that was what we sent out. So that was our production. But that production really didn't have an impact on how the software operated. It would just, if we didn't burn a disk correctly, the software wouldn't install, but that doesn't mean it didn't perform correctly. And she just wanted to keep spending time in production. And we're trying to remind her, this is a software development company. What we do is design controls. That's our big area. So if you want to dig there. You're not going to provide any value to anybody by digging in this part of the company that plays a minimal role. So, or they just, we're a small player in this, or we are a low risk device or a low risk product, so that they don't treat you like a multi-billion-dollar company that's producing high risk items. They have to remember that scope, and they can often forget that. Back to the social aspects, right? Engage them in some normal conversations. Remember I said, research them, find out what their hobbies are, right? This is a way to break the ice and, find some common ground. And maybe, like I said, you avoid the overly nice auditor. You can become the overly nice auditee, right? Auditee, and get them comfortable with you. And sure, it's hard. So there are ways to play this game and go there. I used to work at a place, and we knew the auditor. He was from Boston. He was a huge Boston Red Sox fan. And when he would come in to do the annual audits, it was during baseball season. So there was somebody who was always assigned to know how the Red Sox did the night before, so that we could get him into those conversations during the audit. And then every day, if it's a multi-day audit, multi-week, if it's FDA possibly, have a closing meeting, a short one, just every day, just before they walk out the door, just a quick, all right, how did today go? Any major concerns? All right, what's tomorrow look like? What do you want us to have ready? Where do you think you want to go tomorrow? Who do you want to talk to? It's okay, right? Start to get a sense for, how do we get prepped for this? And if there are any outstanding record requests, you'll want to confirm, hey, you had asked for this. I know we haven't provided it yet. We're working on that. Do you still need it? Or have you found your information in other ways, right? It shows you're on top of things and that you care about how the audit goes. Excuse me. All right, we are at the end here. So a couple of quick points, and then we can maybe go back to the questions and wrap up, and everybody has to leave. That's fine as well. So the key things, okay? Be ready. If you're not already ready, you're already behind the 8 ball. That's why I said it's a do not pass go kind of thing. Get your ducks in a row. The getting your quality culture fixed quickly isn't going to happen. But if you know that then reflects in the effectiveness and the suitability and the adequacy of your quality system, those are things you can work on ahead of time, right? And then that should help you then lead into getting your culture and your organization actually ready for this. Know how you're going to run those inspections, right? It's not passive again, right? Oh, gee, an audit showed up. I guess I have to just listen to whatever they say. Make sure you've already thought through, when an audit happens, we already have this covered, how we're going to manage it, equipment, place, people, the employees are trained. Don't sign anything from an FDA inspector, right? That one. Get to know who your auditor inspector is. Find out as much as you can so you know what their hot buttons are going to be. Again, don't be passive. Of course, mind your manners. You don't want to be aggressive. Active doesn't mean aggressive. But again, it's not like you have to sit there and just take it. right? You play an active role in an audit, as does the auditor. And yep, the devil is in the details, or God is in the details, whichever form of that you prefer. You do want to sweat those details. Yes, those typos can lead to the please dig here. So it's not that you want to ignore things like typos and the small details. Just know that they can add up. If there's a pattern to them, a trend, that becomes the please dig here, right? And again, you should always be applying that process approach that I see the connections. Nothing stands alone in a quality system. And you've got to get the organization engaged. It's great to have really nicely documented procedures, but they don't mean anything if nobody's aware of them. They don't know what the why is behind them, and they don't actually engage in why they're there and what they're supposed to produce. I think that's it for me.
All right. Thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you, everyone, for all the engagement. We will try to answer a few more questions from the Q&A. Before that, I just want to mention to everyone, if you do want a demo of our software, intellect.com is where you can go, or type in demo into the Q&A portion. If your company is maybe not yet ready to take that step, but you know a colleague at another company who is, you could earn up to $5,000 by referring a friend to Intellect. You can visit intellect.com, and the URL is right there. We'll send out this deck later where you can have access to it. Share, connect, and earn. All right. If you would like to contact Steve, if we don't get to all the questions today, you can contact him here. You can hold up your phone and scan a QR code. We've got his email listed. We've got his LinkedIn profile. He is going to return next month. So if you enjoyed this presentation, please come back next month for effective root cause analysis on September 18th. The details will be posted shortly on the Intellect website. I had mentioned earlier that Steve's Guerrilla Tactics webinar was a real success several months ago. He has a 4-hour version of that presentation that a lot of you have asked for. And so he's going to be presenting that on August 20th. The link to register is there. Again, if you'd like a demo of Intellect, you know what to do. I also want to mention that we are going to be premiering AI Smart Analysis, which is our new predictive AI tool, tomorrow on Intellect's YouTube channel. So please go visit YouTube, subscribe to the Intellect channel, and you're going to get a first peek at predictive AI. I want to announce the winner of our road trip webinar series. Thank you so much for everyone who registered for every webinar. The winner is going to be Corky Cooper. Corky, we will email you as soon as possible. You've won a $100 Amazon gift card. Thank you so much. We're going to get to as many Q&As as we can. And if we don't get to them all, you can always contact Steve, and maybe Steve, you and I can connect where we can maybe record something and answer most of these questions. So I'll start in order. Is it required to have a different person review documents that you've written, even if the current process doesn't require it?
So it's really more of a doc control process question. But yes, there's a general understanding you can't inspect your own work. So your process should have somebody else reviewing, your work.
Okay. Let's see here. Regarding internal audits, what are your thoughts in regard to letting each department know prior to the audit so they can prepare, or should the audit be conducted without informing each department?
For internal audits, yeah, you should be publishing an audit plan for the year, an audit schedule. And I think, yeah, you should let people know this is when we're coming in. Again, an internal audit, hopefully you've taught people, look, this is an internal audit. It's not the time to hide things. This is the time to find things. Now, that comes back to the culture. Does management beat people up because of internal audit findings? Hopefully they don't, right? The beatings will continue and morale improves kind of thing. So I think, yes, they should know, right? They should know they're going to be audited, and then this is what we're going to focus on. And, yes, we want them to do their best, but we also want them to be prepared to show us, right, what they're working on and what they know are their faults, right? And how they're going to handle those.
All right, we'll get to one more question. We're going to try to find a way to answer the remainder of these questions, so we'll keep everybody posted. Do you ever write a finding when employees can't explain how their job impacts quality or meets the quality policy?
It's always about trends, right? Patterns. If I ask a number of employees and one of them couldn't explain the quality policy to me, I might just point that out to the person who's leading the audit, hey, you may want to check with this person. They don't seem to be aware of this, make sure they're up to date on it. But if everybody I talk to, or a good chunk of them, are like, quality policy, what's that? Then I'm going, yeah, management commitment hasn't been met in terms of making employees aware of the policy, right? That's a clear requirement. And I've now got data points that show you apparently whatever you're doing isn't working, or you're not doing it at all. Just quick, the one funny story I had about that, I was at a place and I asked that question of an operator, tell me about your quality policy. And they kind of gave me the head tilt and they looked at me really funny, like they had no idea what I was asking. And the whole time I'm doing this, because the quality policy was on a sign behind me, right? That was enough on that single data point to go, you've got this thing up on the wall and nobody's even aware it's there. So I don't think you've actually explained the purpose of that.
Yikes. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Steve, for another engaging presentation. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We hope to see you next month.
Great. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for attending, everybody.
Thank you.